we'll move on to our second speaker now. Please join me in welcoming our second speaker, Rob Waters.
Like Laszlo did just then, let me first start by acknowledging country. I want to acknowledge country as a separate thing. Country is a living, breathing thing, and it has given us, as Aboriginal people, and I believe all of us, country gives us everything that we need to be. I also want to acknowledge elders, both past and present, because they've lit the way for us in the past. I'd also like to acknowledge our children for when we're gone as Aboriginal people. Our children are the ones that will hold the light when we're gone. My beautiful daughter is up the back, Erica May. That's her there. So I want to acknowledge all of our children, not just mine. And lastly, I just want to acknowledge story, because each and every one of us here bring a story to this place. Just as I do, just as Laszlo and Lorena do, all of you do. And I just want to thank you all for coming along and letting me connect with you guys and be part of your story. So as Aboriginal people, we've transmitted our culture and our cultural knowledges over time through the sharing of story, through poetry, through dance, through song, art. You know, we've shared it around sharing food and around sitting around a fire, and we've done that forever. As a child, I grew up around my grandmother's dinner table. Now for me, when somebody talks of home, instant, I go back to my grandmother's dinner table. Not the lounge room, not the backyard, not the front yard. I go back to her dinner table, because that's where all the big stories happened, you know. When there were important stuff happening, the big yarns and stuff, that's where we were. We were sitting around her dinner table. Nan would be cooking dinner, Pop's at the head of the table. We always used to laugh and say that, Pop was the head of the family, Nan was the neck. Nan was the one that used to, if she turned left, he was turning left as well. He wore the pants, but she told him which ones he was going to wear. But that dinner table, that's where we learned, and that's where we were taught. Our little people, our kids sat in conversations with elders and with the adults and stuff, and talked about everything from history to science, to law, to politics, to all that stuff. You know, we sat there with them and we engaged in conversations as kids. I remember one time, it was the first time I went to my friend's house. He was a white guy. I went to his house for dinner, and everyone sat at the table, quiet, elbows off the table. No one was speaking. I was thinking, what's wrong with you people? Like, at my grandmother's house, we're reaching across the dinner table, there's conversations going on all over the place, and people are sharing food, and it's happening, you know, and that's where conversation happened. So we talked about those things, law, politics, all that kind of stuff, but, you know, we also talked about the important stuff as well. You know, we talked about family, we talked about laughter, we talked about love, we talked about the stuff that equipped us as young fellas to go out into the world and share our story with the world. We also learned that many of our stories and many of the best stories that we've got aren't the ones that are written down, you know. When we talk about story, we think about, you know, the great books that we've read, books that have impacted on us and that kind of stuff. But for us, when we talk about story, like I said, bang, instant. I'm back to my grandmother's dinner table. I'm thinking about my nan and my pop. I'm thinking about my old Uncle John. I'm thinking about my Uncle Shorty. I'm thinking, you know, all these people and the stories that they told us and how they impacted me and how I can take those lessons. You know, that's where the important stuff happened. But yeah, we don't think about them as in books. They're not boxed in. They're not caged as such. You know, story's alive. You know, the story in a book. I think story in a book might be like if we was to tell our story and write it down in a book, we disconnect it from home. We take it away from the place where it comes from. I think story comes from somewhere, and it comes from a place. You know, the place that it was first shared before we wrote it down somewhere. It comes from somewhere. So when we write it down and we go, all right, that's the last copy of it. You know, it's not an edited version. That's the last copy of it. We box it up and we disconnect it, and we stop it from being retold and reinterpreted by somebody. Like I said, we come from there as well. I think we Aboriginal people, we believe we're connected to story as well. You know, we come from the same place that story does, the same way that we come from our parents, the same way that we come from our ancestors. We're born from story. We're born from the land. Can I pick this up? Like you're going to say no. But we're connected to it. You know, we're connected to story, and we're interconnected with it. It's part of who we are and what we do. And when we do acknowledgement of country or acknowledgement of or welcome to country and stuff, we talk about we're the custodians. I'd like to acknowledge the custodians of country, because we don't own it. It's the same with story. We don't own story. We're custodians of story. You know, if we were the owners of story, when we go, story would go with us and it'd never be retold again. We're custodians of it. We have to look after story, same way that we look after land, and we pass it on. We don't. There's a quote from a Native American guy. I can't remember his name for the life of me. I should have wrote it down, but he said that we don't inherit this country from our grandparents. We borrow it from our grandchildren, and that's what it's about. And that's the same with story. So what am I doing here? I suppose I'm gonna share some of my poems and a little bit of the story behind them. So yeah, that's pretty much what I'm going to do tonight. And I hope you guys enjoy it. And again, thank you for coming along, and thank you for letting me be part of, I don't know, your story in the next chapter. And sorry for stepping on your bag. This first one that I'm going to share is a very important one to me. This one's, I suppose it's about grieving and the whole process of grieving. Sorry. Yeah, this one's about grieving, and it's about that process that we go through, all of us go through. We lost my grandfather 3 years ago, and I think, I know that I'm still going through that process. It's going to take a while, because he was a very important person to me. He was a very important person to my family and our community. And this one's his one, and I don't know, some of you guys might have heard it, and some may have not, but it's called I'm Not Ready for Springtime Yet. I seem to find comfort in the darkness of winter, in the coldness that cuts to my bones. I sit and I look at the brown, lifeless fields as I sit with my darkness alone. You see, I'm happy in darkness with the sadness surrounding, yet it's easy for me to forget that life will continue with the change of the seasons, but I'm not ready for springtime yet. If your journey had finished when you left us that morning, you left us to sit and await for you to return on the song of a mopoke or the cool breeze of winter so late. Yet the clock hands keep moving and another day passes, and no matter how much we all fret, the seasons keep changing and winter is fading, but I'm not ready for springtime yet. For just one day of winter is all that I'd ask for, to sit in the warm midday sun with you in the backyard, and I promise I'd listen to those stories of when you were young. But now the 4 seasons have come to full circle and our cheeks, they're so rarely wet because winter is fading as we smile and remember, but I'm not ready for springtime yet. Thank you. How am I going for time? Plenty of time? Yep. Oh, heaps of time. Heaps. I'm also going to read some other poems. I didn't just fall into poetry. I was I like Lazer, just grew up away from somewhere, and I needed something. I had an uncle, my Uncle John. He was a songwriter. We'd go around to his house on a Thursday or Friday night, and we'd go around there, and it was funny. He never write anything down. He had photographic memory or something, because all of the songs that he'd ever written were stuck in his head. And we'd go around there, and we'd get there at like 7 at night, and we'd be there till midnight. He'd sing 20 or 30 different songs, and not one of them had he ever written down. He just remembered them, and he was one of my big influences. My old Uncle Donnie was a poet, but I also had other influences as well. There was a Persian poet, he was called Rumi, and me being a bit of a, I'm not a blokey kind of a bloke sometimes. I like love stories. I like the good things in life. I like chasing butterflies. The pretty things in life that make things happy, make things, even if for a little bit, just a little bit more pretty. And Rumi wrote a lot of stuff about love. So I want to share one of his ones. And I remember reading this, about 10 years ago, and I think I fell in love with him. That's how good it is. It says, I want to see you, know your voice, recognise you when you first come round the corner, sense your scent when I've come into a room you've just left, know the lift of your heel, the glide of your foot, become familiar with the way that you purse your lips, then let them part just the slightest bit when I lean into your space and kiss you. I want to know the joy of how you whisper more. Who writes that? Who writes that? Absolutely amazing. Absolutely amazing. But yeah, I fell into poetry. I think I was about 15 when I started writing anyway. Got a few published down there in Sydney, and I've been writing them. I think I've lost more poems than I've still got. I think I've written them down and lost more than I'd even remember. My mum, up the back there, hiding her face against the wall, next to my daughter. Her and my old grandmother, they keep threatening to put them in a book. So I'll be doing that very shortly. But yeah, I've been writing them for a while, and I love them. I love poetry. I love storytelling. I think it's part of who we are, as people, not just as Aboriginal people, but it's we want to tell our story. And for me, poetry is the way that that I can tell the story. Some people can paint, some people can write, some people can, dance or whatever, make films. Mine's through this. Like I said earlier, when we were around the tables and stuff, we'd listen to things about about history, science, all that kind of stuff, and history was a big one for me. Hearing about a lot of the stories that happened, of things that happened to Aboriginal people, and I wanted to be able to tell those stories as well. So this next one here that I'll share with you guys is called Before the Ghost Came, and yeah, I'll just read it out. The children ran through the long grass. They hung from trees as laughter lined the riverbanks. The old people were there to teach them, to show them the old ways. But that was before the ghost came. The young men and old men hunted well, and our mothers cared for us with good food. We ate like kings and queens in those days that have not been talked about for far too long. Those days before the ghost came. See, we were happy. We were connected. We were connected to family, connected to home. We were connected to this place here beneath our feet, but that was before the ghost came. And then one day a new thunder rang, and lightning from long sticks struck the young men and old men down alike, and the children, well, they ran back to the long grass. And again they hung from trees. But there was no laughter left. There were no old people. There was no connection. There was nothing like it used to be before the ghost came. There were only ghosts. Skip that one. So this last one that I want to share with you, I wrote this for a friend of mine. I went up to Byron Bay on a trip and spent a few days with her, and she told me all about her story. She's a Palestinian woman. Her father and her grandfather's village was out near the Galilee Sea, and she told me the story of 1948 with Al-Nakba, the catastrophe, about when she was when her grandfather it was just on the feast day and the big harvest day for the wheat, and forces invaded into the village, and they were taking control of the village, or they were killing people basically. The forces were coming in through the front door, and her grandfather was pushing his family out the back, pushing them out the back door and running away. And they were running for anywhere that they could find, anywhere safe. They were crossing a bridge into Lebanon, sorry, and half the family was up here, and her father was right at the back, and a shell hit the bridge, blew the bridge up. Her father was left stranded. Now, he was a 4-year-old kid, just left stranded in the middle of nowhere, from his family. And yeah, he wasn't in a good space. And then a woman who'd lived just down the street from him came along and picked him up, and saw him and picked him up, and went down the river and crossed at a different crossing, and they got across the river, and they were coming in to Lebanon, and just before they got to Lebanon, she was killed. So again, he was a 4-year-old kid left in the middle of nowhere. He got over the border into one of the refugee camps that was set up, and he was walking along, and next thing you know, this dog comes out of nowhere, out of the back, and ran up to him. And he looked down, and the dog's sniffing, and it was his dog, his family dog, in Lebanon. The dog took him to his family in a whole different country, and met up back with the family. Now the grandfather, as I said, he was I didn't say, but he was an important man in the village, a very important man, and he was very well respected. And this was about the wheat harvest days kind of thing. And by this time, was a few days had passed, and Rahab, her name is Rahab Sharita. Her father said to her grandfather, "I'm hungry. I need food. I haven't eaten." This was a couple of days later. And people in the village said that was the first time that they'd seen her grandfather cry, because for so long he was an important man. He'd harvested all this wheat, he'd provided for his family and all this kind of stuff, and this was the first time in forever that he'd not been able to provide for his family. So what he did, he said to his wife, "You look after the kids, I'm going back." And he walked back into Palestine against this whole army to go and find food. 3 days later, he returned on horseback, sacks of wheat with all of this food and stuff like that. And got back and ended up being able to feed his family again. And when she told me this story, it was an amazing time. For me, I couldn't imagine what it was like for him. So this one here is her poem. There was something else I wanted to say, that she went back over there to Palestine, to her grandfather's village. I think she was about 18, and she got back. There was the first time that she'd ever been there, since the family were taken away and since they were pushed out of Palestine. And we, as Aboriginal people, we talk about connection to country and about home and the importance of home and all this kind of stuff. And she kind of got that. She knew what that meant, about dispossession, or about needing that connection to home. But she said it wasn't until she got back to Palestine that she understood what it meant. Because she went to her grandfather's village, she took her shoes off and she walked on the dirt. And she said that place remembered my footsteps, even though I'd never been there before. I said, yeah, that's it. That's home. Home remembers us. Home, we're connected to country. If Aboriginal people, we believe that we're born from country, country knows we're here, wherever we are. This is called I Speak Her Name. I speak her name in my head over and over. I smile and I speak it softly. I speak it softly, for within her name lies a poem, and any poem worth telling doesn't need to be shouted. It's a poem that tells stories of survival. It tells stories of defiance and stories of truth. It tells stories of why mere men have written poetry for beautiful women for as long as there have been beautiful women and mere men, and the words to describe what it's like to have looked upon such beauty. Within her stride, she carries the stories of her old people, of days lived and lost, and of moments whose stories just need to be told. And with shoulders square to the world, she treads so lightly upon the earth, and though hurried, she walks aware that she is not the first, nor will she be the last to have walked upon that ground. And as her words rush forth from those lips, you can hear her grandfather's story upon them. Strong, staunch and gentle. You hear stories of walking with empty hands and a heavy heart back into Palestine, and of his return on horseback with the food that he was always known to provide. Now I can try to do her justice, even though it's with words that don't even know what it's like to have seen the land that she talks of. And I can try to show the world of why I speak her name in my head over and over, of why I smile, and of why I speak her name so softly. Thank you. So again, thank you. No, I need wine. Yes.
We'd like to know where his grandfather got the food for the family.
He went back to the village.
To his
To his village. Yeah. He went back to his village and stole it. Stole it from people that had taken it from him. No other questions? Awesome. Ooh.
So you were talking about putting your poetry into a book. I actually think that's a fantastic idea. Do you have any kind of plan for how you're going to do that from this point, or is it just an idea?
It's a bit of a plan. I'm going to be doing it as part of my study next year. I've got a scholarship to start. I think one of my supervisors is sitting right there. So yeah, and part of that it's in a creative practice part of the study. So I'll be doing a book of poetry, short story, connecting it to a SoundCloud, and a YouTube channel. Doing a little bit of, I've got a friend in Tamworth that's got some property outside of Tamworth. We'll do some hikes as well. So hike up to a mountain and stay on the mountain for a couple of days, and do some cultural camps and storytelling and poetry camps up on the mountain. Hike down to the next one and just like video that. And yeah, kind of document, put it into a book, put it onto YouTube, and that'll be my next 3 years, hopefully. No other questions? Awesome.
Well, please join me in thanking Rob once again.